What vibe do you think you give?
So I feel like we're saying like we don't need the cars anymore, it's fine. We don't need the cars anymore, it's fine. Conversations are so easy. But
I'm trying to make sure that I stay true to myself. And
How do you know what is true to you? Like, how do you know what that is?
So Katherine, we went out on the streets. We used these playing cards. We're going to say more about them in a minute. And now we're going to react to what people said. Is that right?
Yeah, we had some great conversations. We were just like amazed at how deep people went so quickly. And so we just love to pull apart some of the things that they said and some of the things that it tells us about the cultural stories and some of the threads that you could pull on to have some evangelistic conversations as well. There were some really interesting conversations.
Okay, so that's the cards.
Yep.
King's Cross is where our offices are. It's a brilliant place. There's an art college. There's Google, Facebook, loads of great organizations, loads of people. And we went and asked some questions.
I'm trying to make sure that I stay true to myself and not kind of fall off, not the rails, but not do what everyone else is doing and just make sure that I'm doing exactly what I want to do.
I mean, that is such an interesting line, isn't it? Because I feel like that's such a common thought at the moment, the sense of like, I want to stay true to myself. I don't want to do what everyone else is doing, but I want to do what I want to do and be happy with that. But my question back to that is always, well, how do you know what is true to you? Like, how do you know what that is? And then you're not being influenced by other people. How do you know what's inside of you is actually the right path to go down?
And then she caught herself saying about falling off the rails, and then kind of almost didn't want to say it. It's a bit cliche, but it is that sense of what are the rails? What are the guide rails that we're talking about? We become our guide. Very subjective. What am I feeling like today? Well, I don't feel that's a good thing, so I'm going to oppose it, or I do feel that's a good thing. So I am intrigued, but it's that catching yourself from defaulting to a classic guide rails and then having to replace that with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But it does open up the space for the conversations, what's interesting. What do we do next?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's around, if you're all concerned about falling off the rails, what does it look like to be on the rails? So it is then that question of what is right, what is wrong. How do you know when you're on the rails and off the rails? Like, what does that actually look like in your life?
And there's a great article, I think it was in the Times, the guy was talking about the Quiet Revival, and he is a skeptic himself, the writer, but he was talking to a young man who said, I feel I've got this Christian inheritance that have been held back or taken from me. And so this young guy in his 30s was saying, oh, I had this whole Christian inheritance nobody told me about. It's a little bit like the rails again, when we're going, what is guiding so much of our thinking?
It's really good.
Okay, we could probably talk for ages on that one. Let's see who we got next when we were out in the streets.
Everything is just a vibe.
That was all about the vibe.
What vibe do you think you give?
That's my funny vibe. Did you not get it?
Your funny vibe.
No, that was it. That was as close as you get. I do have quite a serious vibe sometimes.
He gives serious vibes.
I'm interested in the vibe shift. The guys give me a lot of jib for this, but I do think we are on a vibe shift. So much is about, it's not about, hey, I've got this school of thought or I follow this particular set of ideas. It's like, this is how I feel. This is the vibe. The vibe is moving. Some ideas today feel very different even a couple of years ago. So speed of that movement's really interesting.
Totally, yeah.
So even the political parties, like some of the stuff they're saying now, a couple of years ago, everybody been saying, oh, that's really extreme, or that's out there, and now we're shifting. But that again is this problem. How do you navigate this moment if it's all to do with the vibe, how I feel? But fascinating to explore when somebody says that, then
Everything's just a vibe. Yeah, what do you mean by that? And I think non-Christians are even noticing the vibe shift in people's thinking and approach to faith. So I had a non-Christian friend message me yesterday and just ask about life. And, I shared how we're seeing quite a few people explore faith at the moment. Like, it seems to be an interesting time. And they came back and said, yeah, like, I'm seeing all these stories online of people becoming Christians. Why do you think that's happening? And that's a non-Christian friend saying that to me. So I think even people who aren't followers of Jesus can see the vibe is shifting around how people think about Christianity who aren't Christians, and there does seem to be a shift happening in our world, which is just interesting.
So I feel like we're saying like we don't need the cars, of course. We don't need the cars. Conversations are so easy. But anyway, no, we're going to continue. We think the cards really help open the space. So let's see what comes next.
I believe in the best in all people, and I believe there's experiences that make us choose decisions that might impact what we would normally want to do for the best of the world or the good of all people.
So I think the question that we asked her was around, are people inherently good or inherently bad? Which I think is a fascinating question to ask in evangelistic settings, because I don't think people really know how to answer it or what to say.
And it's about, so she's striving for what's the best in people, and we want to see what's best in people, and that's great. But what's driving that? Where does that come from? How do we assess that it is the best? Like, what makes it the best? What makes it good? And again, it goes to a very subjective. I feel that's good. She didn't use that phrase, but I think that's where people often go. So it is really interesting that we want to know what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, what's evil, what's true or false in these moments, but we struggle sometimes to put language on it.
And she definitely goes down the line of things that have happened to people is then what makes them do bad things, rather than we are fallen and broken people and we need a savior and redeemer. It's just interesting to pull on some of those threads.
And she was really thoughtful about it. It was really interesting. And people were really good. I mean, we were casting this in a really hard environment on the streets. You were brilliant at that. I was definitely more nervous. But, we're talking more about using these with people but it was amazing, even with people we didn't know, how open they were prepared to be as you start to ask good questions.
Yeah, and just willing to really think deeply and consider questions and express their opinions. And yeah, I really think these cards will help people have deeper evangelistic conversations.
There's just an openness. And Jesus was brilliant asking questions, and this is, I guess, modeled on him. So let's see, here we had another answer.
Politically, morally, with myself, how that impacts other people is how I decipher if it's right to do.
And a question I would ask back to him around impact is, how do you assess that impact? Because there's lots of different types of impact. There's the short term, there's the long term, there's sort of emotional impact, there's physical impact. How do you create a hierarchy of what impact is most important, and how do you assess that over a long enough time to then make a decision? Does that actually give you a usable framework for deciding what's right and what's wrong? I would say it doesn't. And then hopefully you then have an opportunity to share, well, how do you then think about right and wrong? Well, this is the framework I use. So,
and our relationship with people impacts our understanding of impact. The impact to my wife or kids or something, or my friends, are going to treat that differently than the impact to somebody over here. It's just the way we're wired. So again, it becomes harder to assess impact. It's a good start, but you want to push, okay, what's really driving your thinking? And how might we reframe or invite you into a slightly different conversation around that, that's actually anchored in an ongoing story and a relationship with Jesus and a community of people that helps us understand that. Brilliant. Okay, we've got another response.
I often instinctively think that I'm right, but I'm trying to be better at taking into account other people's opinions and realizing that often people around you, if they challenge your beliefs, it's because they have your best interest at heart.
I loved how self-aware he was and how willing to sort of say that to us, because I don't know about you, but I definitely can fall into that, thinking that I'm right all the time, that I know best. And actually it takes real humility to admit that, to say, actually, I don't always know best, and I need to listen and be open to the opinions of others. And I think particularly in the culture we live in, where people just do not know how to disagree, don't know how to hold different views in tension, to hear, someone young say that, I'm like, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I think mainly for me, it's just, again, the space that question opens for some genuine self-reflection. And from there, all sorts of possibilities open up, which is, I think, our aim with these conversation cards. It takes us to the core of this. We're going back to the vibe shift, I think. The universe is a vibe, so let's see.
I can just vibe with whatever is good to me right now or wrong to me in another 10, 15 years.
The 10-year vibe shift.
It's the classic cultural story, isn't it? It's like, you do you, whatever's true to you, live your truth, just vibe it out, be a chill girl, see what happens. It's an interesting way of viewing life and reality. And I think a lot of people say that, but actually living that out is very challenging. Because if you're just vibing with your feelings, what happens when your feelings don't vibe.
Yeah. And I think context then is massive. This was somebody we didn't know. That might look very different with a friend. That might look very different depending on who the friend is. I used to be a lawyer. I like getting into a kind of maybe a bit more of a head argument around that. You might be relating to them where they're at. Like we're both doing bits of that. So it's not mutually exclusive, but the way the conversation unpacks depends on who we are, who the person is we're talking to, and then maybe rooting that down into something for them. So what does the vibe say about this? What about when this situation happened? What if you saw somebody begging on the street? How would you react? What if you saw somebody being mugged? Or like something that's more tangible? How are we actually going to react about that? What are we going to do? And again, opens up space for these conversations.
Yeah. And even in that, we weren't asking a like super spiritual question, but she brought up the universe. She's like, want to talk about the universe, She's bringing spirituality into that conversation. So again, just gives you an opportunity to say, what do you mean by the universe? Like, what does that actually mean to you? And what does faith look like for you in that?
Okay, let's see another reaction on the street.
Best way you can be a human being is by making other people feel safe and included and welcomed and appreciated. And I think if I wasn't around, I'd want people to remember that they always they felt safe and wanted around me.
I mean, that's right at the heart of what we're always asking is what does it mean to be human? Some variation on that question. Mm-hmm. And again, it's that really interesting space, how relational, how much connection. And there's a little legacy piece almost in there, how she's going to be remembered. And because there's some sense that we live on beyond the now. So that's opened up a little space there. I could see a couple of ways that conversation could go. As you're asking people, it's almost like, what would you like written on your gravestone? That's maybe me because I'm really old. You're asking people what's the legacy? How do you want to be remembered? And then that relational piece is so important.
Yeah, and the human longing of wanting to be seen, known, and loved. Those are some of our core longings that only God can truly fulfill. So you've got so many threads there to pull on and conversations to have. And if I was her friend, I'd be able to really say, do you feel those things for yourself? And that could open so many conversations. But again, just so lovely and so open to just sharing vulnerably. And that's a really nice conversation to end on.
And the bit we were on the streets, that's about the hardest conversations. I was saying, these aren't just an evangelistic tool, that's fantastic. They're also just for discipling and talking to our friends and getting to know them better. They're really mealtime conversation cards. Yeah,
definitely. And sometimes deep conversations are hard to have. If you want to ask someone about legacy or how they view humanity and good or evil, those aren't always natural conversations to just bring up with our friends. But having a deck of cards that sort of do the hard work for you, well, it's not really me asking the question, it's the card, could help some people get over the awkward small talk and into some deeper, more meaningful conversations.
Things like, who or what do you have faith in right now? That's a significance question. What's your weirdest family tradition? One about our random connections in life. What one thing would you change about your body and why? It's about our presence right now. And then if you could rid yourself of one bad habit, what would it be? Getting people thinking. So the conversation cards are available on our website. We'd love you to see if you can use them and have fun with the conversation.